right at the end of 2009, perhaps the first or second day of 2010, I received an email from one of our listeners, and it had an interesting question. The writer wanted to know what was the most significant story that I reported on or presented to the audience in 2009. Well, I think hands down, the single most significant story that I reported on in 2009 was the story of Dr. Lachezar Filipov. Dr. Filipov is the number 2 guy in the Bulgarian version of NASA. It's called the Space Research Institute, and it's a part of the Bulgarian Academy of Science. Dr. Filipov is the deputy director of the Space Research Institute, and his credentials are just phenomenal. When I printed out his curriculum vitae, it took 12 pages. He's just got tremendous credentials, and he is a space physicist and has worked in space programs in Russia. Dr. Filipov gave a statement to the press in Bulgaria in November 2009. I believe it was November 23rd. And in this report that came out in the media, it came out in the press in Bulgaria, and then within hours was in an English translation all over the internet and all over Western press. Dr. Filipov said that, first of all, extraterrestrials are real. Secondly, extraterrestrials are among us all the time and you don't even recognize them. We're in constant communications with them. And that, if that were not enough, I mean, that was gangbusters. But if that were not enough, this article also said, now this is the reporter talking, but the reporter said that there had been a media presentation at which several of the alien species were present. And I'm quoting now. They were present and answered over 30 questions put to them by Bulgarian Academy of Science personnel. Now, that statement was in the first report that came out. That was in the first article that came out. That statement disappeared from all subsequent articles. Now, hear the statement again. A media presentation happened, and at that media presentation, here's the statement. Several of the alien species were present and answered over 30 questions put to them by Bulgarian Academy of Science personnel. Now that is an earth-shaking statement. That statement very clearly says that there was some type of media presentation, that extraterrestrials were present. Bulgarian Academy of Science personnel posed over 30 questions which these aliens answered. That was in the first report, and that report was carried on the wire by Associated Press. You can maybe find it. They've tried to purge it from the internet, but there may be still a page or two out there on the internet that contains that report. That was an AP report. It disappeared. That statement was not in any subsequent statements. Now, you need to know that we contacted immediately Dr. Filipov. That night, we were in conversations, telephone conversations with Dr. Filipov. And he was very excited, very enthusiastic. He said, when we invited him to be on the show, I will do it. It is my duty as a scientist. The world needs to know. Within 24 hours, all of that evaporated. He gave us his private cell phone number to contact him. But we were never able to get Dr. Filipov on that cell phone. And we were never able to get him on his office phone again. It all evaporated. But you know, that isn't the end of the story. What makes this so significant has to do with the missing information out of the news reports and what happened to Dr. Filipov afterward. We tried emailing Dr. Filipov, and all we got in response was a form letter that was sent out. Now, this form letter was sent to everyone that emailed Dr. Filipov. I've seen it on the internet, and it's kind of interesting that some of the sites posted it saying that they had received a reply back from Dr. Filipov, and here it is. Well, if you read that, you will read something written in perfect English. That email was written by someone that is a Native American English speaker. And I can assure you, Dr. Filipov is not a Native American English speaker. Dr. Filipov speaks English, but he speaks English in sort of a broken English because it's not his mother tongue. In the same way that I speak Bulgarian. I don't speak Bulgarian. I speak Serbian, but it's close to Bulgarian, and it sounds like very improper and broken Bulgarian to a Bulgarian. To a Serbian, it sounds fine. Dr. Filipov did not write that email. Someone wrote that for him. With or without his permission, we don't know. But that's what started me being suspicious immediately. My associate host on the Kevin Smith Show is Jerry Wills. Jerry and I were in conversations about the Filipov interview. We were very excited because he had said he would do the interview with us, and he had also told us on the telephone that people are shaking their heads at him, but that's because they don't know, and I quote, they don't know what we know. Continuing quoting Dr. Filipov, if you come here, I will show you what we know. So we were preparing to go to Bulgaria to film an interview with Dr. Filipov. This was significant and is significant. And in our conversation after talking with Filipov, Jerry and I were talking about going to Bulgaria and, getting this interview. And in the course of that conversation, somewhere in there, Jerry said, I just hope someone doesn't get to him before we get the interview. And I said, Jerry will know within the next 48 hours. Well, we did know within 24 hours because we got that email back and we were not able to get Dr. Filipov back on the telephone. So we did know someone had gotten to Dr. Filipov. He disappeared from public view as far as being able to contact him, as far as anybody being able to get interviews with him, for several days, about 10 days. And then a television news station in Croatia was able to get in touch with him and arranged to get an interview with him at the Bulgarian Academy of Science offices. A television news crew in Zagreb, Croatia, somehow managed to arrange an interview with Dr. Filipov to be held at the Bulgarian Academy of Science building in Sofia, Bulgaria. At the appointed date and time, they arrived, and as they had arranged, they set up their camera in the lobby of the Bulgarian Academy of Science building. After a little bit, Dr. Filipov walked into the lobby and sat down for an interview. The results of that interview were nothing less than astounding. The film crew and the reporter spent about 19 minutes with Dr. Filipov and then concluded their interview packed up and left. They said that they were not able to use the interview because, in fact, they were not able to actually carry on a coherent interview with Dr. Filipov. According to the reporter, Dr. Filipov appeared to be intoxicated. But they used a small clip, just a few seconds, of Dr. Filipov's face from the interview in another story that they put together to talk about extraterrestrials. And they never aired the 19 minutes. Through contacts that I have overseas, I was able to obtain the entire 19-minute interview. I also have never aired it because I do not have permission to do so. But I have viewed it. And I have viewed that in connection with, or in cooperation with, a friend and associate of the Kevin Smith Show, who happens also to be a former U.S. Air Force OSI special agent, with his specialty being counterintelligence. Both of us came to the same conclusion independently, and that is that Dr. Filipov is definitely not intoxicated. Granted, that is our opinion, but both of us have the opinion that he is definitely not intoxicated. Now, my background is as a career law enforcement officer, and I am certified in detection of intoxication. It is not always accurate. You need to know that. There are times when it is inaccurate, but it is about 99% accurate. You need also to know that a police officer does not need to smell alcohol on your breath, because alcohol actually has no odor at all. And the only thing that can be observed by smelling the breath is the odor associated with an alcoholic beverage. Maybe it smells like beer, but could it be near beer with no alcohol in it? So when a police officer is standing on the side of a road having stopped someone for a traffic violation, and he's talking with them, there are other things that he looks for to determine whether he should give a field sobriety test to see if this person is intoxicated. One of those things is slurred speech, but that by itself is not enough. I have met people whose speech is slurred naturally. There are people whose speech is slurred as a result of having had a stroke. So that's not enough. Are the person's eyes red and watery? Well, if they are, that coupled with slurred speech may be enough for the police officer to conduct a field sobriety test. That means doing a sobriety test on the side of the road. But even that is not enough. There are all kinds of reasons why a person's eyes may be red and watery. Mine often are, due to allergies. But there is one thing that a police officer can note. He can observe that pretty much nails it down as to whether alcohol is present in sufficient quantities in the person's bloodstream to cause intoxication. That's called horizontal gaze nystagmus. Now, you have probably seen on television, or you've seen on video, where a police officer is standing on the side of the road talking to someone that he suspects is intoxicated. And he holds a pen up in front of their face, and he tells them, watch the tip of the pen. Don't move your head, just follow it with your eyes. And then he begins to move the pen back and forth. And that is called the horizontal gaze nystagmus test. Now, you need to know something. You need to know that pen is not necessary at all. The only reason it's there is because it's part of standardizing the test. And there are 3 scores that are given to each eye. There are 3 things that the police officer is looking for with the eyes, and he looks for that in each eye. So you have a total possible score of 6. If you score 6, you're definitely going to be wearing handcuffs. You're definitely going to jail. But the reason the pen is there is simply to be able to standardize the test. It's not necessary in order for the police officer to see horizontal gaze nystagmus. In fact, if he's asked in court why he gave the HGN, horizontal gaze nystagmus test, his best answer would be, I observed nystagmus in the subject's eyes, and I wanted to conduct the HGN test to determine whether it was due to intoxication. All right, now, when this news crew is interviewing Dr. Filipov, the interesting thing about this interview, a couple of interesting points. One, they do some very close-up, tight shots on Dr. Filipov's face, and you can see the movement of his eyes. They're not red and watery, and there is no horizontal gaze nystagmus. Now, you might say, well, you could be drunk and not have HGN. No, you can't. If alcohol is present in the bloodstream in sufficient quantities to cause impairment, to cause intoxication, you will have horizontal gaze nystagmus, and there is nothing you can do to stop it. It happens 100% of the time. Now, horizontal gaze nystagmus by itself does not mean the person is intoxicated 100% of the time. But 100% of the time, if you are intoxicated with alcohol, you will have horizontal gaze nystagmus. So, there is no horizontal gaze nystagmus in his eyes. It is my opinion that Dr. Filipov was definitely not intoxicated, at least not with alcohol. So what could account for his slurred speech? Well, if you watched the whole 19 minutes, which you haven't and you can't because I don't own that 19 minutes. I don't own the video. But if you watch the whole 19 minutes, you see that Dr. Filipov is obviously extremely tired and sleepy. Now, it's the opinion of both myself and my associate who has viewed this with me, or he has viewed it. We were not together. I was here in Phoenix, Arizona. He was in another state. But he's viewed it, I've viewed it, and both of us independently came to the same conclusion, that Dr. Filipov appears to have been subjected to sleep deprivation. Sleep deprivation is one of the methods and one of the favorite methods of a very, very secret and very fierce former agency of the Bulgarian government called the Državna Sigurnost. The Državna Sigurnost was the Bulgarian version of the KGB, and in fact so closely affiliated with the KGB in Moscow that there were actual KGB agents running departments of Državna Sigurnost in Bulgaria. Back in 1990, very significant things happened in Bulgaria. Up until 1990, Bulgaria had been ruled iron-fistedly by the Communist Party. But in 1990, things were changing all around the world, and more specifically changing for Russia and Eastern Europe. Having seen revolutionary changes taking place throughout Eastern Europe, the Communist Party in Bulgaria, not wanting to face a revolution against themselves, voluntarily stepped from power, and Bulgaria became a democracy. In February of 1990, an announcement was made by the Bulgarian government that the Državna Sigurnost, as of that date, was out of business. There would be no more Državna Sigurnost as of that date. But did the Državna Sigurnost go out of business? Well, again, it's been long believed, rumored, and somewhat documented by other intelligence agencies around the world that the Državna Sigurnost merely went underground. Of course, they stopped going to their headquarters building. They stopped carrying credentials that said they were state security, Državna Sigurnost, but they didn't vanish away. The Prime Minister of Bulgaria made an interesting statement. You see, when the Državna Sigurnost was disbanded officially, all of their files were seized and locked away. No one has seen them since, until recently. Because recently the Bulgarian government passed a law in Parliament that said those files were to be opened, and that every name of every Državna Sigurnost agent, manager, supervisor, and even informants and collaborators, every name was going to be posted on the internet so that the people of Bulgaria could see who had been involved. The Državna Sigurnost is viewed by the majority of people in Bulgaria as having been agents of oppression, torture, death, fear, and they don't like them. So they were going to post all of these names, and in fact have begun to do so. They were also going to make them available on DVD. Now, the Prime Minister of Bulgaria made an interesting statement just a few weeks before Dr. Filipov made his statement to the press and then became inaccessible. He said that he was expecting a report in early 2010 that detailed who in the foreign ministry had been affiliated with Državna Sigurnost, and that he expected about 90% of the foreign ministry would be on that list. Quite an interesting statement, considering that many intelligence agencies around the world believed Državna Sigurnost had merely, if you will, changed uniforms, gone underground. On November the 23rd, 2009, that's the date Dr. Lachezar Filipov made his statement to the press that extraterrestrials are real, they are here living among us, we don't even recognize them, we're in constant communications with them, and as that very first news report stated, that some of these alien species had shown up at a media presentation in which they had answered over 30 questions put to them by the Bulgarian Academy of Science personnel. Now that statement disappeared almost immediately. And almost immediately, Dr. Filipov became inaccessible. That was November the 23rd. Within 24 hours, Dr. Filipov was inaccessible. Within 24 hours, that statement was not in any further articles about Dr. Filipov. On November the 27th, 4 days later, the foreign minister, now remember what the Prime Minister said about the foreign ministry being full of Državna Sigurnost. 4 days after Filipov made his statement, the foreign minister resigned. And the reason? It had been revealed that his name was in fact on the list as a Državna Sigurnost agent who had worked for them up through 1991. Now, what's interesting about that is here you have records of the Державна Сигурност who were put out of business in 1990, allegedly, showing that this foreign minister had been associated with them up through 1991, a year later. So we have documented proof that Державна Сигурност did in fact continue to exist, at least for that 1 year. And what is there to make us believe they went out of business then? The Державна Сигурност merely changed uniforms. They just went underground. And they have been, according to many of the intelligence agencies around the world, the Державна Сигурност have been working for key members of parliament and key high-ranking industrial moguls. Among those high-ranking business moguls are the heads of, I think, every major media operation in Bulgaria. Now, I could be wrong about that. I could have missed one major media operation out there that isn't headed by someone who was with Державна Сигурност. But major media in Bulgaria is headed by Державна Сигурност people. And they are, of course, if Державна Сигурност merely went underground, they are going to do the bidding of DS. They are going to do what they are told to do. So even though the Sofia Echo, which is owned by a media concern headed by a Державна Сигурност person, a person who was affiliated with them, they printed in the Sofia Echo that first report. That first report said that there had been a media event, a media presentation, at which several of the alien species were present and answered over 30 questions put to them by Bulgarian Academy of Science personnel. Within 24 hours, that was no longer in the media, and what was in the media was Filipov saying that extraterrestrials are among us, we don't even recognize them, and then reportage that he's merely looking at crop circles and trying to interpret the symbols. So there's been a sea change here in the media at the same time that Filipov becomes inaccessible. And the next time Filipov is accessible, we have this news crew from Croatia coming in, trying to do an interview, and going away saying he was intoxicated. We couldn't actually conduct an interview. But in that interview that they could not conduct, they asked a question. They said, well, tell us about the extraterrestrials. Are they here, and are you meeting with them? So when the news crew, when the reporter from Croatia asked that question, the question everyone wanted the answer to, the question was, tell us about the aliens. Are they here, and are you in contact with them? Are you meeting with them? Dr. Filipov's answer to that question pretty much nails down the fact that he had in fact been subjected to serious and perhaps a bit torturous treatment, certainly unpleasant treatment, and would lend some support to the idea that he was in fact suffering from sleep deprivation. His answer to that question was, that is the information that if I tell you, they will kill me. Who was he referring to? Was he referring to his bosses? Some people might say that Dr. Filipov certainly had been subjected to some sort of angry response from his bosses at the Bulgarian Academy of Science. Well, maybe. But would they kill him? No. Surely not. Well, let's say then that the aliens are real and that they would be upset with him if he disclosed that they truly exist. Is that the case? Well, obviously not, because he had already disclosed it. Who was going to kill Dr. Filipov? Who is it that has convinced Dr. Filipov in a matter of days, literally in a matter of hours, that he is not going to talk about these extraterrestrials anymore? Who is it that could do that? Well, again, the only group of people that had such methods, techniques, intentions, and power in Bulgaria would have been the Državna Sigurnost. News media in Bulgaria have reported that there are 60 prosecutors, that's 60 currently serving prosecutors that are former Državna Sigurnost. They have also disclosed in the press, in the media over in Bulgaria, that there are about 40 members of parliament that are former Državna Sigurnost. And as I've already said, the major media, most of the major media in Bulgaria, is owned, operated, and controlled by former Državna Sigurnost. It was not Dr. Filipov's superiors in the Bulgarian Academy of Science that were going to kill him. That makes no sense at all. It certainly was not the extraterrestrials. He had already disclosed they exist, they are among us, and we're in constant communications with them. But for Dr. Filipov to say anything further on the matter, he was convinced it would cost him his life. But at whose hands? I don't have, and probably never will be able to get, absolute proof that it's the former agents of Državna Sigurnost that handled Filipov ill enough to convince him they would kill him. I can't prove that, certainly. But everything points that direction. The currents in the river of politics in Bulgaria, the currents and the trends in that politics, certainly shows Državna Sigurnost to be still existent, and certainly show Državna Sigurnost to be still the bad boys on the block. Underground, hiding behind other agencies, but still there. It is my opinion that it was Državna Sigurnost acting perhaps, and this part is speculation, perhaps on orders from their former masters in Moscow, that decided Filipov had better be quiet. We perhaps will never know the answer to that question, but I have said on the air, and I say here, and I will continue to say, that the whole world should keep their eyes on Dr. Lachezar Filipov. The treatment he got is like taking a yellow highlighter pen and putting yellow highlight over everything that he said. While they tried to shut him up, the fact is they pretty much proved what he said was true.